So here we go. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we are delighted to be able to record this program with David Baldacci to promote the launch of his brand new book, To Die For, which today we're recording this right around Halloween time, but the book was on sale on Tuesday, November 12th. And that's when we'll be launching the video. If you place your order, you will get a exclusive. Is it exclusive or is it? It is exclusive to us
Well,
or
to
to?
this book. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. It's exclusive to this book. It's not entirely exclusive to the Poison Pen.
Gotcha.
We have bookmarks to match our signed copies that David has kindly provided us with.
Great. Want me to restart?
You might want to. That was a little
Yeah.
shaky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Right. I wouldn't mention that we've recorded it and for the date and everything. I would just say, leave all that out. It'll just confuse people.
Got it. I can do that. All right, Rob. We're starting over. Here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we are delighted to be interviewing David Baldacci this afternoon. His brand new book is called To Die For, and all the orders that are placed through the store will be receiving a custom foil bookmark for this book. And so, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We're just delighted to be able to offer David's new book and the custom bookmark. And actually, David, which is so great. David came to see us. When was it? Was it last November or 2 years ago?
It was last November, as part of the Kidney Foundation event out in Phoenix.
Right. And it was an interesting event because it was 2 weeks before publication date. So we were able to have everybody buy the book and stand in line, and David personalized it, and then we had to take them away.
That's right. I remember that.
I know, and it was so weird, people had to hand over their book, but publishers are serious for a variety of reasons, and I'm not making fun of them about publication dates because there are many things that go with a firm publication date, and it's important. So I thought it was really flexible of them that they let us have, several hundred books for that event and trusted us not to let people bolt out the door. I hope nobody did. Anyway, so we're looking at the 620 Man, and David, this is the third book you've written about Travis. And over the years when we've talked and all, you like characters and then you do a few stories for them, and maybe that's all you have to say about them, or maybe you just want to go on to something else. And then we get new people. So I thought that the last book, The Edge, which I truly loved, which we could talk about in a minute, absolutely required a sequel because there was kind of a cliffhanger, not a cliffhanger, but there was stuff at the end that clearly you wanted to address. And I'm not going to ask you if you're going to commit to reading more of Travis, but I will say to those of you who read The 620 Man and The Edge, then grab To Die For, because you can't be sure. You really can't be sure that David is going to write any more about Travis.
Yeah, it was. I did leave that unresolved at the end, and that issue definitely is resolved and To Die For. He's an interesting character. In some regards, physically and his background, he resembles from some of my other characters. Federal, he was a military fit guy, but he's lost. He reminds me a little bit of Amos Decker. He's got this emotional baggage from his background. He left the military, which he didn't want to do. He feels like you have to pay this penance. And he's working with this agency, and he goes around the world basically, stomping out fires. And at the end of The Edge, I left him with a really, a big issue. Somebody wanted to kill him and they were closing in. And he sent off to the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. The reason I did that, I actually last year traveled to the Seattle area and really was inspired by the setting and decided to set the book there. He goes there to help guard a 12-year-old girl he has no idea what to do with her. He's never really been exposed to that. Her uncle is this global criminal. He's being prosecuted by the federal government right now, but the uncle wants custody of Betsy, the 12-year-old girl, because her parents died mysteriously and he's the only family she has left. And that's the question: why does he want her? And what happened to Betsy's parents? Because she claims that they didn't die of a drug overdose; they weren't drug addicts. So he is really an uncomfortable, unfamiliar territory with this one. And all the special skills that he has to stay alive and all that really are not serving him well in dealing with this situation. But I like putting my characters in unfamiliar territory. It's like when I write a new series, I'm putting myself in unfamiliar territory. I've got to create a brand new world with new characters. And it's scary to do that, but it's one way really to continue to evolve a character. How do we change as real people? We're confronted with something new. And so we have to adapt to that new, you know, challenge and we move forward. And that's what I like to do with my fictional characters because we get a lot of emails from people that said, you know what, I'm not this, person that you wrote about in the book, but I've been knocked down by life and I had to get back up and figure out a way to keep going. And I find that a lot with your characters.
I think that's true. The thing is that, like in this series, you've moved him to different places, and therefore you can bring in Travis goes along, but you can bring in new characters like the FBI agent. The woman FBI agent in this book is really an interesting character. She's very hostile to being babysitting, I think, Betsy.
Yes.
That's what you believe. She's very hostile to having Travis show up. I mean, she's an FBI agent, and thinks she ought to stay in charge. So, you're able to bring in real conflict by introducing people who may not want to work with Travis.
Yeah, it's for me, this was a game of you never know what people's real motivations are. You don't know who's aligned with whom and what they're doing behind closed doors and what the real scenario is, actually. What Travis is told this whole case was about may not be what this case is all about. And the reason he was brought there may not be the real reason why he was brought there. So I like that he's figuring this out as he goes along too. Oftentimes when you go into a mystery or thriller, at least there's a parameter set that, okay, here is the playing field at least. He's going to be confronted by bad people. And he's got to figure out how to get past that and get to the truth. But when you go into a playing field in this novel, you find out the playing field is not really what you thought the playing field was supposed to be. So right from the get-go, everything is on a quicksand. And I like that. I am a big fan of Slow Horses, the show, and also the books it is based on by Mick Herron. And in that one, you never know what reality is. You never know what anybody's actually saying. It's like I remember the Linda Opes, who unfortunately just passed away. She's a big time film producer. She wrote a book about Hollywood years ago, and I think the title of one of them was "Hello, He Lied," which I love. I've always loved that line. So right from the beginning, they're lying to, so you don't know who to trust. And then To Die For, Travis Devine has no idea who to trust.
Very true. It's so funny that you mentioned Mick Herron. I might be the only person that actually read and imported Mick Herron's books before he wrote his first Slow Horses book. And I thought, I can't remember the name of it. And Patrick, you probably won't either. Patrick often, as you know, helps me by using the chat function to bolster my memory. Was an absolutely brilliant, I think it was set at Oxford because he lives there. And it started out in an academic setting, and then the next thing you knew, he was such a good writer, but for some reason, David, they never caught on. And now Slow Horses,
Absolutely. Well, I'm in the opinion that if you're really good, at some point the audience will find you, and that's happened with him. And I'm so happy for him. He deserves everything he's gotten, and it's a great show and based on a great series of books. So I like building this world. My job as a fiction writer is to build a world, but I'm not going to let anybody off easy. I'm not going to let the readers if they want to assume things,
Mhm.
that's up to them. But that's assuming something is not the same thing as it actually being true.
Very true. Let's go back and talk about Travis because we haven't really defined, at least in this conversation, who Travis is working for. I mean, how is it that he is sent to, pal up with an FBI agent, which is a really unusual thing? And why do you call him the 620 man? Let's be basic here.
Yeah. So in the very first novel, he worked on Wall Street and he lived in Westchester County, upstate New York. And he would take the 620 train in to Manhattan every day, early train in, worked in Wall Street, got to get to the desk early, start making their millions of dollars and all that stuff. So that's where the moniker came from, the 620 man, just from the train coming in from Westchester. So he works for the sub agency. I've created it. I call it the Office of Special Projects. It's like a 50-person crew. The head of it is a two-star retired General Emerson Campbell, who's sort of his mentor, and the one that actually forced Travis in the very first novel to work for them. So he's a federal agent without having gone through all the auspices and training of a federal agent, but he was an Army Ranger, so he has the physicality, he has the skill set to do this sort of job. And he's sort of thrust into this. It's like you either do this or you get a Leavenworth for all the stuff that happened while you were in the Army. So it's a Hobson's choice. You either do it or you sit behind bars for the rest of your life. And so even though he respects Emerson Campbell, it's not like Travis Devine is necessarily a truly willing participant in what he's doing here. So when he gets put into these situations, his job is to fix it and not be killed. There were his two goals, meet the mission goals and try to live through it. And if he can get out the other end with those two things intact, then he's done his job and he moves on to the next one.
I'm not sure that Campbell is actually has just the one goal, which is fix it. I don't know that Campbell's goal is for Travis to survive.
Well, it was really funny when I was writing the John Puller series and my Army CID agent, and I had this generator blow out at Fort Leavenworth. That's where Puller's brother was a prisoner there. And the generator blew out, and because of a lightning storm, terrible storm came through. And I had the Army wait until the next day the storm was past so that they could safely, restore the power. They could send their military guys out there to safely restore the power. And I just sent those pages to a friend of mine in the military, and he wrote back and said, no, never would happen. And I said, what do you mean? He said, they would never wait until the storm was over. I said, well, the guys who could be killed up there trying to put the power back on with a thunderstorm and lightning all around. He goes, doesn't matter. The mission becomes before personal safety. Put them out the same time the storm's going on. If they die, they die.
Wow,
So
that's a utilitarian view, isn't it?
I
It really is.
know. But it was like mission comes before personal safety. That was the message I got.
Well, I'm not surprised at that. As you know, we do an extraordinary number of military thriller events here.
Yep.
In fact, Tuesday, no, what day is today? Today's Wednesday. So Monday night, I had two authors whom I really like, and you would probably like their books. David McCloskey, who is an ex-CIA analyst and wrote his first book set in Damascus, because while he was at the CIA, he was the Syrian guy. And then
Right.
Taylor Moore, who also was a CIA guy, but has chosen to write a kind of CJ box in Texas with a DEA agent. But we talked about, what it was like to work there, and what you have to, what you have to think about when you leave, and what they will let you talk about, because you have to go through a review process and all
Oh, yeah.
this other stuff. And I raised the question, which sort of pertains to what we were just talking about, is A, do they care if you die while you're on your mission? And B, if you leave them, are they okay with that?
Mhm.
Because, nothing is probably more dangerous than some guy that, has operated and then can leak. There was a brilliant series. The first book was called Once a Spy, written some years ago, when somebody's trying to kill this old man who is in dementia, or he may have Alzheimer's, and his son can't figure it out because he thought his dad was a washing machine salesman who traveled all over. Keith Thompson was his name. I love that book, and I'm not sure why they didn't do better. But the whole idea was that the CIA felt that this guy was such a risk because of his coming dementia and all that. They decided to just kill him. Now, I don't know if that's actually a CIA operating policy.
If it is, they'll never admit it, obviously. But
No, but I mean, you do have to wonder, how safe is it if you have somebody, that was enmeshed in espionage, government secrets and all. What happens when they leave the agency for one
yeah,
reason or another?
a lot of institutional knowledge that walks out the door with them. And I blurbed David McCloskey's new book coming out too. So yeah, I enjoyed
The
that one.
seventh floor.
Yes, I enjoyed that one very much. And
These
so
are
I love, I love talking to people who've been in those roles, and the ones who can write about it in fiction or authoritatively and exciting, and conveys a great story along with that sort of inside world is always just fascinating to me. But these agencies have to do what they have to do to, have they had their own people killed for various reasons? I wouldn't say it was impossible. I think their goal is to make sure that their mission succeeds and they stay alive. A lot of people think that the CIA had something to do with JFK's assassination. Remember, he famously said he was going to blow the CIA into a million pieces. And So who knows? At the end of the day, people can rationalize anything given the opportunity and the motivation. You know that.
Well, you're a fiction writer, so you're entitled to make up whatever you want to.
I can,
So the
yeah,
second book, The Edge, which is, I think, wonderful for many reasons, took advantage of your personal time and your connections to Maine. I thought that was one of the best landscapes in, in terms of the background of the story that you've written.
yeah. I've been to Maine many, many times, all over the state, and it's sort of like Virginia in that it has lots of different variations. The interior is heavily wooded and hilly and isolated. The seacoast reminds me a lot, in some ways, the Virginia seacoast, the parts that are rocky and craggy and all that. So it's like you're in, several different states at the same time, depending on where you are in Maine. In many places, it's hard scrabble, along the coast, fishermen, that's a tough way to make a living. It ebbs and flows with nature and climate change and everything else. But in the Edge, I said it during the winter because I wanted it to be difficult and hard terrain for everybody. And I wanted that landscape to be a character in the novel. And so I needed to spend some time to sort of let people know, here's what I'm talking about, it's isolated, it's rural, it's a tough way to make a living, but the people there are very tough and they're independent and they can get stuff done. They don't rely on anybody else other than themselves and each other. And it's it was for me, it was important if I was going to set the novel there to do justice to it, not just to say, hey, I'm in Maine and never not describe it or mention it or try to tie it into the story. So that's what I try to do in The Edge.
I thought you did it really well, and the landscape really shapes what happens to Travis. It shapes how he pursues his mission. The whole bit. The Edge is now out in paperback, so the 620 Man and The Edge are both available now in paperback. And To Die For is now a hardcover. Just for those of you who don't quite understand how publishing works, that's how it works. But anyway, there was a character in The Edge who apparently is trying to kill Travis, and this character is now appears in To Die For, and you call her the girl on the train, which was that a nod to Paula Hawkins, or you could just resist it, or what?
Probably a little bit, and also it was the best way to describe her because she literally tried to kill him on a train that was going across Europe between Italy and France. And so that name just fit for her because I didn't want to reveal her name, nor did he have any way of knowing what her name was at that point in the story. But she's a mercenary. She and two other people, there's a three-person strike team on a train, and their job was to take Devine out. They would hire her to do it. Luckily, he, you know, was able to beat them and killed two of them and made a grievous mistake. He left her alive. And now she is after him. And at the end of The Edge, when he flies back home to Virginia and he gets off the plane, he's at Dulles Airport, somebody bumps into him. He doesn't really register on that. He gets in the cab. And when he gets out of the cab, he finds a piece of paper in his pocket, and it's from the girl on the train who was the one who bumped into him and said, we're going to get you, third time's a charm. This time you're going down. And
Right.
so she becomes, a fairly substantial part of the novel. But what I wanted to do without giving a whole lot away is I wanted to address what would happen with her in a way that most readers would not have really thought was a possibility just because of the way I set the thing up, and let her be more than just another foe for him. And I guess the reason I did that is because I wanted people to understand that sometimes people do really bad things doesn't necessarily make them an evil person. You have to look at the motivations and look at their background and look at, their justifications. I'm not saying that people who go around and harm other people are good people. I'm just saying that understanding motivations and backgrounds of people are really important to evaluate one, what they do, but more importantly, why they do it. And she was sort of an example of me trying to do that in this novel.
I thought it was great that you fleshed her out because she was, kind of a shadow figure before.
She was
And this time, I think, I mean, she's a fully three-dimensional human being in this book. And I think it has all the more resonance what the action is if you know who she is, that she's not like some just, casting villain, call a villain number 3 from casting or something.
That's right.
No, I thought she was very well done. I really liked the FBI agent, and the person that you obviously put a lot of interest in and a lot of emphasis on is the 12-year-old girl
Yeah.
who's really got a mind of her own and who surprises Travis because he has no idea what kind of person she is.
Yeah, Betsy Odom. It's interesting. Betsy Odom was a character auction name at the Amelia Island Book Festival in Florida. A lady bid on the name. Her name was Betsy Odom, and the real Betsy is she's in her 60s, in her 60s, and has grown daughters. And her husband won the auction and wanted me to use her name. So she's very excited about receiving the book, and a lot of the reviews I've gotten. I don't know if it was Kirkus or Publishers Weekly, just loved Betsy Odom's character. They said she was a pistol. And it was a balance. I mean, I've raised a daughter, mine's 31 now, but I remember when she was 12 years old. And it's a tricky time in anybody's lives, but particularly young girls. I mean, they're just about to become a teenager and lots of things are going to be happening to them in various ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, and different from boys. I raised one of those as well. Um, and it was this fine line of, yeah, I wanted her to be you know, just independent and strong. But at the same time, she's in a situation with the humble most adults and scare most adults. So I also had to pull back on that and just show that she was vulnerable and fragile and didn't know what to do. And sometimes her hubris, her chutzpah, was just born out of fear, and she just wanted to try to take back a little bit of control of her life because all of a sudden, once her parents were gone, she had no control over anything, any aspect of her life at all, even where she was supposed to live. And people were fighting over her. One side wanted her, the other side wanted her. So she was really in a vulnerable position when Travis came along, and he had to understand that. Because again, he was as clueless as anybody would be with a 12-year-old girl. He just didn't know what to do with her, and his fighting skills and everything the army had taught him were absolutely useless. In trying to understand this. So it was a very cool dynamic, and I brought back some of my memories as a father, and dealing with a 12, 13-year-old girl and trying to, remember things that I did well, things which were too numerous, unfortunately, that I didn't do so well. But you learn from your mistakes, and it was like I wanted both of them to get through this situation together, but come out the other end understanding each other better, and maybe growing a little closer because of that. Because at the very beginning, they were just at loggerheads. And the process of writing the novel allowed me to sort of get them through this together, which was my goal.
Actually, she's a good character that you might, not want to just shuffle off stage forever.
Yeah.
I think she has real potential. There are not that many very young tour stars, but she could certainly be one of them. But no, I mean, I did think, that the Edge, I loved it, a lot of it for Maine.
Yeah.
And some of the other characters, but this book, I thought you really brought these characters to life. The characters, I mean, I know it's Seattle and that part's interesting, and I've spent a lot of time there too, but I thought that the characters in this book were so strong, and in conflict, but yet not, I don't know what the word is, they're not malicious. Um,
No.
and that's an interesting thing because it's so easy to make a villain just, be some kind of psychopath or, you
Right.
know, evildoer or whatever it is. But these are all people that have reasons for what they're doing.
Right. And I tried to extend that to everybody and most everybody in the novel. Some of them are just bad people, and that's okay. Every novel can have that. But like a character like Danny Glass, who was Betsy's uncle, he's a global criminal, and the federal government's going after him. There's no doubt that he's done bad things, and people would look upon him as being a bad guy, and they would be right. But if you dig a little bit deeper, um, not everything about him is bad and evil. He's actually has underneath of it, he has some good intentions and some good desires. But you have to dig really deeply to get there. And as a writer, I couldn't just say it, I had to show it. I had to take you through this guy's evolution of who he is and thinking. And I know early on in the novel, you're looking at a guy like him and going, scumball, evil, I'll put him in the box over there. And I can't wait till Travis puts a bullet in his head. And then my job as a writer is to blow all of that up and not make it. And I'm telling you, it's not going to be that easy. Don't put any of these characters into a box. They're a lot more complicated than that. You got to keep reading to kind of figure this out. And those are the sorts of books I like reading. I hate it when I successfully label people early on in a novel. And at the end, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I was right. They did belong in that box. I mean, it's kind of a downer with the story. And you feel like the author could have put more into it than he or she did. And so what I try to do with this novel is just I built out characters early on that made you make assumptions, and then I tried to write a story that forced you to reevaluate all of those assumptions.
It's not just about the people too, that, if to write a thriller, just one plot line is not necessarily going to carry you through, the length of a thriller, which, averages, this one's just a little over 400 pages, but thrillers run somewhere between 300 and 400 pages as a rule. And so if you're going to have some texture, you have to have secondary plots, but you don't want to have like blinking lights coming on saying, okay, here's the new plot strand.
Right.
I mean, most savvy readers will understand that if there was a mysterious accident in the past in the background of the story, that maybe it deserves more investigation. I mean, that's a fairly common thing to
Yeah.
have happen, but we don't know that for sure.
No, you don't. And one of the things that writers have to try to do well, if they're going to have a number of call them plots, half plots, subplots in the novel, you can have some that are sort of appendages, but you have to have a reason why they're there.
Yeah.
And there are others where you can take, what you feel is a subplot, but actually dovetail it nicely and to make it actually an offshoot of the main plot, so that the main plot could not have made sense without the subplot attached to it, which there's a case of that in this novel as well. So you have to think about those things, because I don't want to write, 6 subplots and try to mash them together that they make sense somehow, because that's a little, as I told a writer the other day who was working on turning one of my book series into a TV series. I said, I like your pitch, but what you're proposing here is a really heavy lift.
Yeah.
And you might want to back off of that, because a lot of the stuff that you want to try to resolve here, that could be season 2, season 3, season 4, and he appreciated the comment. So sometimes you get too ambitious in a novel, and I'm guilty of that as well. I think every writer sometimes have done that. But the more books you write, you realize that sometimes less is more, less is best. And instead of cramming too many things in, try to make the select few that you pick for the novel the very best they can be.
So here's a question in regard to that. You have a canvas that generally, I just mentioned it earlier, has some limits. I mean, most of the time it has to be more words than X, but not more words than Y or more pages. So when you're doing all this, have you developed a kind of I don't know what the right word is. Do you know, as you're pacing it along, that how much room you have left and how much, time and room you have to resolve the various balls you put in the air? Does it become instinctive after a while?
It's almost like a sixth sense, but then and I've done that. I don't know, my novels tend to be anywhere from 112 to 118,000 words, which is
Right.
roughly 400 pages or so. But the book I just finished, it'll be out in the fall of 2025, a brand new character. And this is something I've never really attempted before. This new character, he's unlike anything I've written about before. I was about 85,000 words into the novel, which, 3/4, 80% through. And I still had a hell of a lot left to do. So I spent a week and I cut 15,000 words just here and there, make it trimmer and leaner and meaner. And then so I was at 75,000 words or so. And before I knew it, I was at 110,000, and I still had a lot more to go. So I decided this is going to be a 2-book series. There's no way in the world that I can actually put everything I want into one novel. It would be a really crappy novel. But if
Gotcha.
I put it into
Right.
2, it's going to be great.
Well, you're in a position to do that. A lot of new writers tell me that the advice they get is put everything you can in the first book in case you never get a chance to write a second book. But that's
I was
not
used to be
actually
there.
an issue for you. So if you decide to make it a duology, why not? And especially, if it goes out of the box being advertised as a duology, then readers' expectations conform
Yep.
to that.
Yep.
I agree with you. I think there are many books that would have profited from being divided up into, and not just from reader fatigue, but on my end of it, there's a physicality. I mean, books that are really huge are very difficult to handle. You know, they can be hard to sell, they're hard to ship, they fall. I mean, there's just a whole lot of problems connected with a book that is
Yeah.
unwieldy.
Well, it's also, I wish I didn't have to fight against it like every other writer does, but there's also this attention and deficit span that's happening with people, even, even older people where they're now used to reading stuff online and, looking at Twitter feeds, X feeds, whatever it's called now, and having a difficult time making it through 50 pages, much less 450 pages. And, you have young people who they're not used to reading more than 100 or 200 words at a time. And I can't write my novels like that. All I can do is try to write novels well enough, and just like every other writer, that people will read them no matter how long they are and will enjoy them and be, entranced by them, and will pick up another one. But it is, I mean, it's different from it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or even maybe 5 years ago, where the world was not dominated by social media, where, this much content, is what people expect to read, and then they move on to the next one that's this much content. So it's, and I read a study too where social media is actually transforming how our brain works. It's like
Mhm.
shrinking parts of our brain that can deal with long form narratives.
Yeah.
And that is
And it's
really
a dopamine hit too, I think, David, too, is that, the thing is that social media is this constant barrage of stimulation. And if you are absorbed in something long form, then the dopamine hits go away. Do you know? I mean, talk about going all the way back to basics. Has anybody ever told you about Agatha Christie and how she wanted to write?
no.
Well, I mean, it's illustrative of what we're talking about because Christie, was very plot driven. She was incredibly ingenious in the plots that she wrote. So I talked to Collins about this in London, so I'm not making this up. But anyway, her ideal book length was 130 pages, 132 pages, because she wanted people to be able to pick up her book after dinner and read it before they went to bed so they didn't lose the plot because the plot was so complicated.
Right.
The publisher, I'm not sure I had the page number right. Anyway, it comes in signatures, and signatures are, I think, usually 32 pages or something like that. And so whatever it was that she wanted the book to be left about 29 pages, just sitting there. And her publisher thought, God, what a waste, we can't do whatever. So they forced her to write them somewhat longer, simply to fill up, the
The
pages, the
signature pages.
signatures and all. But I think she was right in that, and she's very good for young readers too. I mean, if you have a young adult reader or something, Christie is actually an excellent thing to give them because it is relatively short and, you move through it and it's all very clear by the time you get to the end what happened.
Yeah, they're quite the few. They're puzzle set pieces, which it's almost like doing connections on the New York Times and trying to get the four letters together into a subgroup. And so I definitely get that. And people can get hooked on those types of stories and maybe then go into longer form narratives, and that would be a good thing as well. But and I like it too that when you read a Christie novel, I've got some of the old paperbacks, and they'll even like in their short stories there'll be like a little pause right before the killer is revealed, and they'll say, and the reader should take a pause here to see if they can come up with the correct solution before they turn to the next page. Which I've always loved that in the paperbacks. And then you think about it, and as you're right, your plots are so complicated. Oftentimes you don't know who did it, and then you turn, you find out who did it, and you're like,
Right.
hey,
And
you did.
actually, they had something for many of those Golden Age books had something called a clue finder, which Martin Edwards, who's a very distinguished British historian of crime fiction, as well as an author, has written a series in which he's revived the clue finder, which is at the end, he will put in the major clues and what page they were on and, what you were, if you were paying attention, what you should have picked up on page 49, when it went like this, you should have, you know, um, but that, I mean, those books were intended to be interactive in the sense that, they thought that readers should participate and see if they could beat the author in divide, going through the puzzle and all. And I think there's an awful lot of lazy readers now. They just don't query what's happening. They just want to read it.
Read it. I know, and be told the answer and sort of participating in the mystery itself. I know.
Well, you and I have been through generations of publishing here, and and not that many generations or longer than that, but publishing has really changed an awful lot since David started and since I started.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no question that COVID accelerated some of it, and certainly the digital age has made a huge difference. But
Yeah.
I think you have to do what you have to do, what works for you, and
Yeah.
just assume that enough people will go along with that or enjoy it, that you can keep going.
Yeah. That's all you can do. Yeah.
And speaking of keep going, David has had a banner year, and he's had numerous awards. Every time I turn around, you're going somewhere, accepting something. I think it's been great. Does it make you feel sort of like a senior statesman and all to have that happen to you?
Yeah, I think I tell people I'm getting these things because I've just been around for so long. But it's always nice, to uh, receive credit from people you respect, from your peers. And it's also nice to go to some of these events and meet young writers, up and coming writers who are just starting out in their careers. And I certainly remember when I was in that position. And it's really exciting. It's scary. It's exciting. You want to keep doing this because you love doing it, and you want to keep building your readership. And that's why I tell, young writers, please don't abdicate control over your career. Yeah, you need to write the books, but don't just say, well, I won't learn anything about the publishing industry. I'll let other people deal with the marketing and the business end. They'll take care of that. I won't even think about it. Because you're going to end up one day going, why aren't my books selling? Why aren't they marketing me properly? Where did all the money go? And you need to understand the business you're in, just like any other business. If you were in the real estate business, you're a real estate agent, you would learn about that business. You're a writer, you need to learn about the publishing business.
Well, if you can. I mean, it helps that you had a legal background so that you
Oh,
weren't swanning in for running an art gallery or something and being
yeah.
totally,
It
totally
helped. It
confused.
helped big time, because in the world of royalties in this country, have not been fair to authors. And I long ago went away from that model, moved on to something that's far fairer. Everybody walked away feeling good about what they got. But just because it's always been done a certain way, it doesn't mean it needs to be continue to be done that way, particularly if it's not all that equitable.
Well, I think evolution, is essential for survival, no question about it. But you're very generous, and very helpful to other writers, but you do a lot of charity things too. I mean, some of your appearances have been not in promotional mode, but rather you being charitable. And I like the fact that you give back so much, David.
Yeah, my wife and I now are in really the position of giving away a lot of things, a lot of money to different organizations. And what we're trying to do in my native state of Virginia is to endow various institutions, library systems, universities, law schools, um, and give them a lot of money to then bring them together so that they can have a multiplier effect that could go beyond the state's boundaries and into other states and across the country. A center for civic discourse, an institute for justice, and learning about, this country's history, about how we can move together as united people. Those types of things where instead of being divided along party lines, where you happen to live, how much money you make, whether you have a college degree or not, which divides us all, we need to move beyond that, and realize that, we're citizens of this country. We should be united. We can disagree, but we have issues that we can move forward. And so a lot of our charitable giving, apart from our Wish You Well Foundation, which helps to, eradicate illiteracy in this country, are going along those lines. We have a plan mapped out and we're going big time with it. And the organizations that we're working with are, they said we've never, we get lots of money from people. We've never had anybody come in and say, we want you to form alliances and networks with these other institutions. No one has ever done that before. And I said, this is the only way that you can have an impact beyond your own geographic boundaries,
Right.
in your own little territory. And then if you come together, you can actually have a national impact, which I think is what is needed. So we've really, in the last few years, my wife and I have been moving forcefully along those sort of quests, to build that infrastructure, because you know, at every level, in this country, I see the need for that. I think people are tired of the division and the fighting and the name calling and all that. They know we have challenges, and the only way to get through them is to come together. So there's no other option other than just breaking apart as a country. And I don't really think most people want that. So that's something that we really have given a lot of thought to, and we're trying to build something for good.
Well, I certainly support that. I wish that we could restore civility. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to have people have any kind of fruitful discussion or work together if there is no civility. And, I think I'm just appalled at how major characters act. And it gives a license. The thing that's so horrible is that it gives a license to younger people, and they say, well, so and so, if Elon Musk can dance on the stage or whatever it is, then. And I don't know if we can go back. I really don't. But all we can do is what we can do,
Yeah.
and hope that that there can be a restoration of civility, which then leads to people working together.
Yeah.
And as you say, or we fall apart. But I think this is a really crucial time. David McCluskey, whom we've earlier mentioned, pointed out the other night how much this feels like the 1930s,
Yeah.
when things were, you had communism and you had fascism and you had all these things, clashing together. And look at the mess it made. So there we are. But anyway, let's not go further into that. Let's talk instead about To Die For, which is instructive and entertaining, and I really like Travis. And I'm not going to ask David if there'll be another Travis, because I think there could be.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a trilogy.
Yeah, I definitely think Travis will be back. I just read the first draft of the movie script for the 620 man film that Netflix is doing, and gave comments on that. And now the writer's working on the second draft, and I liked a lot of the things that he did, and I think the next draft is going to be terrific. And so I like Travis Devine's character, and my litmus test for every series is: do I have more to say? Does the character
Right.
have more room to evolve? And I think he does.
Yay. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. And, I think it's great that you do that rather than pushing a character just because it's popular or something past the point where the character is interesting and then people kind of turn off and, whatever. There are many characters that have outlived their, fictional lives. So good for you that you keep changing them. Although I do have people that come in and they're sort of sad about, some of the characters that have come and gone. But
No, I know. Well,
yeah.
they see them again. I've sold a lot of series, and I've sold 5 series in the last 18 months, including the Camel Club, which is at NBC Universal. And
Wow.
they're very excited about the Camel Club and what they want to do with that. And Amos Decker and Adley Pine. And it looks like the Will Roby series is also going to be going to the small screen. And so it's, characters I haven't written about in a while. People may be able to see them on TV or movies
It's
soon.
wonderful. I do think that long form television has been a remarkable boon. It's so hard to take a book like this and compress it into a 120-minute movie, or to have it littered with commercials so that you wind up with 45 minutes or something instead of. I hope the economic model for streaming is not going to go entirely away now that we are past COVID, where everybody was sort of like chained to their couch. But
Yeah. No, they're doing a lot of good content, and I think that, people respect that, and streaming seems to be where it is now. Now all the cable and primetime channels are having to play catch up,
yeah,
and
well, the writer strike and COVID, caused some serious backup, but I think it's great news. Well, David, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you. I will look forward to being able to sell your book to people on November 12th. And as Patrick earlier mentioned, David has signed our copies. They are shipping to us as we speak, and we will have a custom bookmark to go with it, which looks absolutely gorgeous. And I might point out, might make it an attractive gift, right? To give to somebody. Right. You could buy the 620 Man and the Edge in paperback and then give them a new book, and the bookmark will work for all three. How about that? Right. Anyway, best to your staff and happy Halloween and best wishes for the holidays. And we'll talk next week.
next week. Sounds
All
good.
right.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.